Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back. It's Marav here, and you're joining me once again in my womb. No more travel is for me today. And today I want to talk to you about something that I was really interested in for a lot of years, and something that kind of comes up in our awareness every once in a while, and it's about happiness. And a lot of times people have said, happiness is kind of like an orgasm. The more you think about it, the more you try to catch it, the further it goes for you, because you can't really be in your head to feel happiness, just like you can't really overthink orgasms. But nonetheless, in the last few years and throughout history, throughout philosophy, philosophical time, there was always this doctrine towards happiness, and especially lately the wisdom, the self-help community, positive psychology is this new branch that came up, where happiness and the actualization or the realization of our own personal happiness has been really front and center. So there are four doctrines of happiness theory, and I'm going to give it to you in modern terms, in the sense of positive psychology and philosophy. And then I'm also going to bring it into the Sanskrit, the spiritual ladder, what the ancients knew around this concept, this thing that we're calling today happiness. So in modern psychology, in positive psychology, there is that initial number one ladder, that number one step into happiness, which is called self-knowledge or self-realization, knowing who you are, that stability. It gives you a huge surge of serotonin, building something bigger than yourself, living into that reality that was created for you, and just really being proud of everything that you're doing in your life. Great kind of basis, that self-knowledge, that self-realization of who you are. And then the next level of happiness literature is self-control, self-activation. So this is sort of knowing who you are not. It creates a lot of dopamine levels, right? We have to experiment into who we are not, what doesn't feel right, what's sort of a gamble, what has us feeling a little bit disconnected from ourselves. But it's an evolution that we have to take. It's mandatory towards our full evolution and our self-awareness. Then the next level is that self-actualization, sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that top of the pyramid, right? Once we've met our basic needs, there's only a certain amount of wealth and a certain amount of creature comforts that really make us happy. Anywhere below that and we're unhappy, but really anywhere above that doesn't make us any happier. What we need is to get into that self-actualization, that part of us that needs to feel self-fulfilled. Then we get into a deeper and almost more philosophical place of happiness that most people in our society don't really think of, and that's that self-awareness, that awareness of not just what makes us happy, but the awareness of our shadow element, the awareness of our impending death. And when I say death, I don't mean like physical death, but that part of us that that the ego wants to hold on to, that the ego death wants to so make sure that we hold on to. It's that identifier. And who would we be if we weren't this, or if we weren't that, if we weren't a mom, or if we weren't a lawyer, or a career woman, or a doctor, or a student, or a daughter? All of those things we get really scared of, and it's a part of our growth. We actually need to get there. So that's kind of in the modern world how we see happiness, which is really great. It gives us a great overview. But in fact, the ancients had a system to describe all this as well, and it really mimics and mirrors exactly what we see in modern psychology. But the best example of this is that the Sanskrit language and the ancients in the Sanskrit world had four distinct kinds of happiness. It was a spiritual ladder, and it spread throughout the ancient world and had different words, different labels for it in different languages. But in this video, I'm going to talk specifically about the Sanskrit words that describe it and some of the ancient rituals and rites that came in different parts of the ancient world. So the first level of the spiritual ladder is santosha. It's contentment. It's that comfort zone. It's sort of like what we talked about in the positive psychology world. It's those day-to-day repeatable and forgettable pleasures, right? They're forgettable because they're so constant. They're consistent. They're our homeostasis. It's a hedonic treadmill. We feel like we'll feel better. There are some rewarding pleasures in the moment that they come, like eating a whole big cake. It's very pleasurable in that moment. It's pretty forgettable because it didn't really give you that satisfaction that you thought it did. And this doesn't just mean those kind of negative or not contributing to your success. It could also be a spin class, gives you a little high in that moment. You feel a sense of accomplishment, but that single exercise class or spin class or aerobics class isn't going to contribute to your overall health. It's just that momentary pleasure. Just like the cake, eating the full cake isn't going to, in that one sitting make you ill or make you have a lifetime of bad health. It's a singular moment, and that's santosha. It's a singular moment that kind of gives you some happiness. It's the hedonic treadmill, right? We get on it, we think that thing's going to make us happy, and then when we get off that treadmill, well, we're kind of back to where we were. So that's level 1 of the spiritual ladder. And then as we move up the spiritual ladder, we get to sukha, which is happiness or deep-seated well-being. So this is a happy life overall. It's about consistent maintenance of your daily life, the nurturing the things that you really want in life, like your family, your career, your studies, your body, your health, your home, that steadiness. It's about balance. It's about choosing the things that are going to contribute to that sukha, that happiness or deep-seated well-being, and obviously then choosing the things that are not choosing the things that are not going to contribute, that restriction. So it's a consistency of choice brings you sukha. And most of us strive for this level of happiness. And for sure, living at that level of happiness is a happy life, without a doubt. You have reason to be happy. You have built a life that looks happy, that has building blocks of being happy. Here's the clincher, though. Here's the hard part. Many of us in the Western world have built this life of sukha, this life of contentment and well-being, and we can't really say that any single thing is wrong, and yet something's not connecting for us. Something in it is making us strive for something else. Something feels missing, like there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing, and we can't really say what it is, and we say we're grateful for everything that we have, and we have built everything that we have, and we're proud of it, and rightfully so, and yet something else is calling us. And that we start to look at in the next levels of the spiritual ladder. So the next level is mudhita, which is joy, which is that irresistible elation that you see when little children are splashing around in puddles, that, there's not a care in the world. It is happy for no reason whatsoever. In fact, often it's despite reason, right? You look at the Dalai Lama, anyone who has seen the Dalai Lama live or on video can see that he exhibits this childlike wonder and awe, irresistible elation. And yet, if you look at his life, and he was ostracized or kicked off of his native land. He's had to live elsewhere. I mean, there are many reasons why he could be unhappy, but he is unreasonably happy. So happy beyond reason. And there are many people like that. And somewhere along our life, usually children are very much like this. And somewhere along the life, we lose that mudhita. We lose that element. We start going more into that sukha, that, well, I'm happy because I've built a nice life. I'm happy because I've gone to the spin class and not eaten the cake and not gambled and not taken drugs. And, because of all that, I'm happy. And you should be. But mudhita is the basic element. It's a higher level of that. It gives you happiness for no reason. If you can hold on to that, then that takes you into the other elements with joy and ease and irresistible elation, and you become magnetic to all the forces around you. Then as we evolve up the spiritual ladder, would you believe that there's even one more level of happiness beyond irresistible elation, beyond joy for no reason, happiness for no reason? And that, my friends, is Ananda. Ananda in the Sanskrit world means this thing that we don't really have an English translation for. The closest we come is the word bliss or euphoria or ecstasy. But when you think of Ananda, you think of bliss, you think of kind of like lying at the end of yoga class and Shavasana, just feeling very zenned out, blissed out, right? Connected to something bigger and transformative and bigger than yourself. It's like you're having an out-of-body experience. But in our Western world, we don't really see that as a height of ecstasy or euphoria. We kind of see it as this calm, blissed out, zenned out place, which is cool. It's actually both. Ananda actually means both. Ananda, or the word, let's say, ecstasy, is exactly, if you break down the word, we have homeostasis, homeostatic, where we keep a certain level playing field, a certain level of emotions. Ecstasy is beyond that stasis, is higher than that stasis. So what we're doing is that we're actually creating a peak experience, a moment of time that is beyond what our normal life is, beyond what it is that we can kind of explain in this sort of physical reality. And there are usually, in history, there have been ecstatic movements, there's ecstatic philosophy throughout time and in every one of the ancient cultures. And traditionally, there are sort of 4 ways to access this. One of them is drug-induced, and so we have seen lots of psychedelics, both modern and ancient, that officiate or allow for this kind of ecstasy, and I'm not really promoting any of those. There is obviously sexual ecstasy, Tantra, the school of Tantra, and accessing through that, and some people might have even had a lot of experiences with that. I know a lot of people tell me privately that those are some of the peak points that they've gotten to feel that and know what that is. There's something called Bacchanalian, which is, it was sort of a Greek rite of passage. Usually now we talk about sort of like these rowdy, drunken 4-day parties that we think of like with Roman festivities and the orgies, and where you have just become so part of this party that Bacchanalian effect takes over and you have ecstasy. Or what I'd really like to access, and what I'm talking about, is spiritual ecstasy. So the ecstasy of the mystics, the Sufi ecstasy, what Rumi would have, or the ecstasy of Teresa. Most people in our world only know this type of ecstasy as fleeting, what's called an analogical moment, when time just stands still and you're watching as if outside of yourself. Usually this is associated, that kind of moment is associated with some sort of trauma, like you're about to crash into another car and that time just stands still and we're traumatized. That thing, usually we think of that kind of ecstasy or ecstasis taking us out of homeostasis. We usually associate it with fear, with a traumatic, fearful response. But wouldn't it be very cool to invite ecstasy, or that analogical moment when time just stands still and you are watching yourself, as if from above, as if you've got a bird's eye view of your life, watching from 35,000 feet up above and watching your life play out in that ecstatic moment. Wouldn't that be cool if we could just tap into that and have that as our litmus, that as our ladder of happiness? And wouldn't all the other elements of happiness just fall into place then? If we were just living in this constant sort of allowance and watching out and an invitation to ecstasy in our life. So those are my thoughts for today, my Monday musings. I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, I wish you to be bold, be brave, be beautiful, and be you. See you next time, beautiful souls.